It's been an interesting weather week here in central Illinois.
That's right. We're back in the Weather Center now with meteorologist Jacob Dickey to answer your weather-related questions. Jacob, how's it going?
Oh, I think the first question is how dare us, right? It's cold out there, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah.
It was like a little jolt after the nice few days we were having.
Yeah, it is. But certainly with those big changes in temperatures, questions have been coming in, haven't they?
They have. So let's get right to our first one. With yesterday's severe weather risk, it is unusual. Is it unusual to have severe weather this early in the season?
So this has been a question we get a lot. If you go back to the days with Judy Frazier, I talked to her once and she said, it is very rare that I remember any wintertime severe weather events. But as we've had warmer winters recently, warmer air, you get some active weather, we've had plenty of severe weather risk in the last decade or so. Most recently, here's some pictures I've got for you. First off, you might remember this photo. This was 1 year ago yesterday. Champaign County had a tornado, 3 of them actually, from Champaign up to the north and to the east there. These were some weak tornadoes. They were in the morning hours. Some of you probably were at school or whatnot, can remember that. So that certainly was interesting for us. And then as we think about some of those other ones here, you think to December, a couple of years back, we had some tornadoes. January 3rd last year had tornadoes. So wintertime severe weather can happen. And it's always important to remember that the weather and the weather ingredients, they don't go by the calendar here. It's not Heather Roberts' annual trip to Mexico in the wintertime to stay warm. Right. Whenever those ingredients are there, the weather will do its thing, and we seem to have those ingredients more often in the wintertime.
And is that a lot of it is just the fluctuation of temperature? Like we're really cold, then we're really warm, then we're back to really cold again?
Yeah, exactly. That's going to definitely play a role with it. Looks like we've had that risk here yesterday. We've always had warmer weather come in, and it followed by a big drop, and when it happens, there's usually some trouble.
Okay. Next question.
This next question says, I saw a post talking about how there was a dry line in the forecast. What is that? What is a dry line?
Dry lines are weird, aren't they?
What are they?
You ever heard that?
No.
Never heard of it before.
So let's talk about the different types of fronts first, give you a little education. Some of this I think is going to be a review. First off, our setup, we had a jet streak overhead, maximum wind. Think of the highway aloft in the atmosphere. Well, the maximum speed was overhead, so that was a good setup. And then at the surface, beneath that, this weird dry line made an appearance that's in place here underneath. And that's what made us a little worried about that severe weather risk. Let's talk about our front types. We all know what a cold front is, right? Warm air coming in ahead of a front. That cold front comes on through. That's what came through late last night, this morning. It's cold out there on the back side of that. We got our warm fronts. They lift on through the region. Ahead of them is some cold air heading to the west. We got warm south air coming into the region here. Our stationary fronts, it's kind of like the two air masses are battling with each other. They're not really moving in one direction or another. There's a rare one we don't talk a lot about. It's an occluded front. Basically, the cold air is wrapped entirely around, and it pinches off that warmer air. And then we really don't talk about dry lines here. Dry line is just like a front, but instead of temperature, it deals with humidity. Ahead of the dry line, we have very humid air. Behind the dry line, we have dry air in place. Usually on both sides, it's very warm here. And with this one, we had our dry line. Our cold front came sweeping through and cleared all of that out. But that is what a dry line is. Unlike temperature, we're looking at humidity. And if you think of some of those big Great Plains severe weather outbreaks, a lot of times it's very strong dry lines that they have. We didn't have quite as strong of a dry line, but to see it in February in Illinois, a bit unusual.
So does a dry line create severe weather?
Yes, a lot of times you get some lift from them, and that contrast in air masses is enough to cause some of those issues. So I could spend all day on it.
Okay, well, we only have time for one more question. So our last one is, Monday also brought fire weather alerts to the area. How do you forecast fire weather?
Yeah, interesting, right? We've had about all, haven't we?
Yeah.
Earth, wind, fire, rain, whatever. When we talk about fire weather, first off, we talked about our fire forecast. This was the forecast for Monday out there, and what we're looking for, a couple of things. So we're looking at relative humidity. Relative humidity is relative to the time of day. It's an inverse relationship with temperature. You may recognize this. I've shown this graphic a few times. As our temperature rises during the day, the air volume expands, the density decreases, so that mass, the volume of the air expands, but the moisture content doesn't change. It's like going to the fast food restaurant. You get the small drink, but you take that small drink and pour it into a large cup. Our relative humidity drops into the afternoon then, and when it gets to the point where those relative humidity values look like they did Monday at 2:30, teens and 20s out there, very dry surface. Let's add some wind to that. here first you can see the future track showed those humidity values rising at nighttime. So the wind then, in addition, get that strong south wind. What we see sometimes is in those scenarios is you got a warm wind, dry air. The vegetation is also dormant out there. So if you get a fire, those types of conditions can usually help it spread a little bit quicker. Field fires, grass fires, you think of anything like that. We're not talking wildfires like they have in the West Coast and forested areas, but you get some fires that can spread a little quicker than normal.
And always a risk to structures when those happen. And
That's right.
So it's good to be careful. Maybe hold off on those burn piles for a little bit.
Yeah, when we have that fire weather forecast, that certainly is this one.
All right. Thanks, Jacob.
Thank you, Jacob.
Always fun hanging out over here in the Weather Center. If you have a question for Jacob, you can post it on his socials or email it to him, and maybe he'll answer it next week.